College football has crowned its national champion. The noise of the transfer portal has finally settled into something resembling calm, and yet Notre Dame somehow feels more present than ever, hovering in conversations that stretch from January hindsight to January ambition, from what might have been to what now feels inevitable if the pieces fall into place. Marcus Freeman's program sits in that familiar, uncomfortable middle ground where success is real, progress is undeniable, but the margins between being very good and truly great still feel thin enough to obsess over every snap, every decision, every moment that bent the season in one direction instead of another. With spring practice still weeks away and a roster that looks dramatically different from the one that closed the season, the questions pouring in feel less like idle curiosity and more like a collective attempt to understand whether this version of Notre Dame is finally ready to kick the door down rather than knock politely. If there were ever a temptation to replay a single snap from the Freeman era, it wouldn't be born out of bitterness so much as gravity. The 4th and goal from the 11-yard line against Texas A&M carries a weight that is impossible to ignore, not just because of what happened in that moment, but because of what it represented in the larger ecosystem of the season. ESPN's analytics painted a clear picture before the ball was snapped, giving Notre Dame better than a 70% chance to win, a number that only sharpened the sting when Marcel Reed escaped pressure, a hold went uncalled, and a pass floated into the hands of a tight end few expected to be the difference. That single play didn't just swing a game, it redirected an entire postseason conversation. Win that night, and Notre Dame isn't debating playoff exclusion or hypothetical respect. It's a lock for the field, holding a head-to-head trump card that would have flipped the narrative the same way Miami's win later flipped Notre Dame's fate. It's hard not to imagine a different January entirely, one where the Irish are still playing while others argue about resumes. There have been other moments, of course, plays that live in that same painful mental archive. 10 men on the field against Ohio State still sparks debate, but even there the numbers suggest the Buckeyes were overwhelmingly likely to finish the job. The stakes were enormous, but the path forward probably doesn't change in the same way. The Texas A&M snap feels different, more like the Bush push all those years ago, when a single stop could have rewritten a national title matchup. These thought experiments aren't particularly healthy, and yet they persist because they underscore how close Notre Dame has been under Freeman, how narrow the line has become between frustration and fulfillment. That closeness is also why the spotlight on C.J. Carr feels so intense, even after what was objectively an outstanding first season as a starter. Carr didn't just survive his first year, he thrived, posting elite efficiency numbers, commanding the offense with a maturity well beyond his age, and earning the respect of a locker room to the point where some quietly believed he could have worn a captain's patch as a sophomore. The question now isn't whether Carr is good enough, because he already is. The question is how high the ceiling goes when the context around him changes. With Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price no longer forcing defenses to overload the box, Carr won't get the same built-in advantages from play-action gravity. Defenses will test him differently, daring him to beat them without the constant threat of explosive runs tilting coverages. The USC game looms large in that evaluation, not because it defines Carr, but because it revealed something he hasn't yet had to confront often: what happens when things spiral. His QBR that night cratered to a season low, and for the first time, one bad throw snowballed into several, culminating in a brutal interception before halftime. It wasn't a physical failure so much as a mental one, a moment where neither Carr nor the coaching staff found the right lever to pull to reset the rhythm. Against most of next season's schedule, that kind of funk might not matter. Against teams like BYU and Miami, or against playoff-caliber defenses in December and January, it absolutely will. Learning how to stop the bleeding, how to steady himself when the game starts pushing back, may be the single most important step in Carr's evolution if Notre Dame truly wants to play deep into the postseason. That belief in growth also applies to how Notre Dame navigated the portal, a process that initially felt unsettling before flipping entirely. Early panic gave way to a finish that felt dominant, the kind of reminder that programs operating near the top of the sport rarely stay down for long. What began as a metaphorical 10-0 deficit turned into a lopsided win by the time the dust settled, a lesson in patience as much as execution. Nearly a third of the roster will be new, a staggering level of turnover that brings both opportunity and uncertainty. Among those new faces, the impact of defensive tackle Francis Brieux stands out immediately, not just because of his physical ability, but because of his experience. College snaps matter, and Brieux arrives with a volume of proven production that makes projection less guesswork and more expectation. Just as important may be Charlie Partridge, whose arrival as defensive line coach feels like a force multiplier for a unit that too often struggled to generate pressure when it mattered most. Freeman spent much of last season lamenting the disconnect between fronts and coverage, a refrain that spoke to deeper structural issues. Partridge's familiarity with Chris Ash's defensive philosophy offers the promise of cohesion, of a front four that can influence games without constant schematic help. Around them, high-upside talents like Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter embody the risk-reward nature of this portal cycle. Their athletic ceilings are undeniable, even if their college resumes are thin. Notre Dame has lived through both outcomes before, and the hope is that at least one breaks through quickly enough to change the complexion of the offense. All of this unfolds against the backdrop of a broader question about Notre Dame's place in a rapidly siloing sport. Independence has always been part of the program's identity, but scheduling challenges and shifting playoff dynamics have made that path narrower than ever. The upcoming schedule leaves little room for error, with only a handful of ranked opponents and limited opportunities to stack resume-defining wins. As long as the NBC partnership remains strong, the ACC relationship holds, and playoff access stays open, independence remains viable. But the pressure is unmistakable, especially as the Big Ten and SEC increasingly turn inward. Even the portal philosophy reflects this tension. Curt Cignetti built a champion by mining proven production from smaller programs, while Freeman has leaned more heavily into upside and development this cycle. The hit rate may not remain as absurdly high as it has been, but the trade-off is long-term roster stability and the chance to mold elite talent within the program's culture. Brieux represents the ideal middle ground, immediate impact with future upside, while others will require patience. That balance will define the next phase of Freeman's tenure as much as any single game. Through it all, the questions keep coming about moments replayed, ceilings imagined, strategies debated, and traditions weighed. That, more than anything, feels like a sign of where Notre Dame is standing right now. The program is no longer searching for relevance or direction. It is searching for the final clicks, the small adjustments that turn a 10-2 season into something unforgettable. The margins are thin, the scrutiny relentless, but the belief is real. And as another offseason begins, it's hard to shake the feeling that Notre Dame is no longer asking if it belongs in the playoff conversation, but how soon it can force its way to the center of it.